On this week's The Next Interview Show podcast.
In many cases, I'm working with the CEO and often their leadership team in finding that alignment is a critical part of their businesses, making sure that team is aligned, that entrepreneurial lead, CEO that started the company and founded it. They may be great at that, right? But again, it's their baby, they own it, and it's my way or the highway kind of thing. Getting them comfortable at the standpoint of sharing it outright and being able to collaborate and getting that broad feedback has been really important.
Hi, I'm Dolan White. I'm the host of the Next Interview Show podcast, and I want to make an offer to you before we get into the interview here in just a couple of seconds. I want to offer you to go to my website. It's dolanwhite.com/LWC and download a copy of my book. It's called Lead with Confidence, 4 Bold Steps for Empowered Leadership. And in it, there are 4 pillars of empowerment that I talk about that you can apply immediately that may help you in your leadership journey and help you today. Now let's get to our conversation. Welcome to the Next Interview podcast. I'm Dolan White, and as you know from the introduction at the top of the podcast, I'm the host. I am it. And today on the podcast, for the sake of transparency, I have a gentleman named The Dude, named Gary White. And Gary is my youngest brother. And I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to have this conversation together. This is going to be a lot of fun. And we've promised each other that just because we've put 2 brothers in the room at the same time, this is likely the highest ranked podcast I've ever done of all of the episodes thus far. So welcome to the podcast.
But no personal stories, right? Nothing under the radar. We got to make sure we keep it semi-respectable as we go through this, because folks after the podcast, we'll get you my email, and if you really want to know something, just ping me, and I can let you know anything you want to know.
Yes. I didn't even think about that coming into it, knowing the secrets we know. And it's reciprocal. So yeah, we'll keep it on the
there we go.
on the up and up, just to avoid any potential opportunity for retaliation in there anywhere. But I'm really looking forward to the listeners having a chance to learn from you and hear your story. I tell stories about you frequently when I talk to people. There was not long, years ago, when you were on an airplane and you were sitting next to someone and they asked you what business you were in, and you said hardware, and the reaction you got from that. And we'll maybe get into that just a little bit as we're going through it. But look, the people watching the podcast don't know you. So I just wanted to let's take a couple of minutes and just at the top and talk a little bit about your career, kind of your journey. And then we'll kind of get into where you are and the lessons that you bring forward. So I'll kind of put that back in your hands to do that.
Thanks. And this is awesome. It little uncomfortable, a little awkward, but it'll be great. My background's pretty straightforward. In air quotes, I call myself a seasoned executive, aka maybe a little older. But I've been in home improvement literally all my life. You think about, way back in high school, started working part-time at a home center, and then, went to college, thought I was going to be one thing and wound up going back into home improvement, and have had the chance now to be in home improvement literally my entire career and be involved in energy efficiency, be involved in making homes better, be involved in store operations, be involved in purchasing and really the supply chain piece. I've had the chance to be involved really kind of in every aspect of a home and home improvement. Great opportunity to work for Lowe's, great opportunity to work for Home Depot. So I've worked for some of the biggest and best. I've also had the chance to work for some smaller organizations that, be honest, were startups that had really great aspirations that we either wound up selling off or moving them to other businesses. But yeah, home improvement all my life. And it's one of these things where, I've talked to my teams and folks I work with I know it's a little bit idealistic, so forgive me, but every day I get to make homes better. And you think about that from the perspective of look, I'm not a brain surgeon, not doing tech work, that kind of stuff, but the chance to make homes better is really a pretty cool gig.
Yes, it's funny you mentioned that, and not to make a couple of notes so we can, it was an idea, but not to kind of underplay your role. But when you were at Lowe's, and Home Depot, when you talk about being in the home improvement industry, right? And those are two giants. Those are the giants here in the United States. I'm not sure from a global perspective, but your role in both of those organizations was substantial, right? So when I talk to leaders all the time, I talk to executives, I talk about two things. I talk about job and I talk about role. Job is title. I'm the chief umpty squat inside of an organization. And then there's what I do. That's my role. And so let's maybe let's Lowe's most recent experience. And I talk about what your job was, your title at Lowe's, and then what that role meant. So what is it that you did?
Yeah, so at Lowe's, I was the vice president over the home services or installation services business. So you think about getting a new floor, getting new doors and windows, getting a new roof. I was responsible for all of the operations of making sure that happened at your home and happened at your home in a really good way. From time to time, may not have gone good, but hopefully we made it always right. But then also took care of everything from program development to pricing to marketing. And then we also operated multiple call centers that fell underneath my umbrella. And then additionally, we had obviously significant sales responsibility, both with the in-store activities as well as a very large outside sales staff.
Yeah, so it's interesting you talk about that, because I think one of the complexities, and I know we'll talk about the shift from going from inside the body of a multi-billion-dollar company, as you and I were talking about kind of pre-podcast, and going into an entrepreneur, and you're running your own business, and kind of what that is like and lessons in it. But from that role inside of Lowe's, I think one of the things that shouldn't be lost in all of that is the complexities of that, the complexity of managing people whose hearts and minds you own, right? People who are Lowe's badged, who are part of the organization, but then also working with individuals whose hearts and minds you don't own, who have their own business and their own agenda and their own, direction that they're going, and to coordinate those together to an outcome, which is, to your point, to make homes better. As a leader, and I love that you mentioned that. And one of the things that's always important is you have a worthy ideal. And the worthy ideal keeps us focused on why. It's the why I'm doing what I do, the for the sake of what, that drives us, that unifies everybody. So one of the things, maybe let's talk a little bit about kind of the challenges of, that you faced, kind of keeping that internal group and that external group. How in the heck do you synchronize those to get to a single outcome that you're accountable for?
Yeah, we'll back up just a little bit to joining Lowe's. So there's a bit of a full leadership changeover at Lowe's. So new CEO brought in, new executive vice president of stores. Good news is I had worked with them prior in a different opportunity, and I got the phone call. Right, it says, "Hey, would you be willing to come and and run this business?" And at that point, I asked the simple question of, "Hey, can you send me the P&L so I can see what I'm kind of stepping into?" First comment was, "Well, we actually don't have a P&L." And then they went and dug one up, and we looked at it, and lo and behold, there was, we'll call it, significant opportunity for improvement in the business, and just in the core services business, right? Customer satisfaction scores, the way it's structured, profitability, revenue goals, etc. So a big part of this was really kind of sizing up the current team that was in place and the current processes that were used, and really the kind of technology backbone. But I'd say, Dolan, probably the biggest opportunity as either a new leader or being there for an extended period is really getting that alignment, with the team, and back to the earlier comment, that common goal, right? Of what are we trying to go after? And then at Lowe's, we proudly work with independent contractors or independent service providers to do the work. And to your point, they are exactly that. They're independent. They, they run their own businesses, et cetera. And we ask them, to work within our framework, right, to deliver the value that we expect. So getting them aligned to kind of that common set of goals and making sure that we are all heading the same way. We all may not row exactly the same way, but as long as we're all really kind of heading that same direction, we were able to make some incredibly substantial progress in the business, driving that alignment. And the alignment was challenging, right? It was lots and lots of meetings, lots and lots of consistency, getting everybody collaborating, and collaboration takes time. And sometimes in our business, right, you got to just make the decision and go. So it was that real balance of getting the collaboration, getting the team buy-in, but at some point we gotta go, right? We got to move forward. We got to make the decision. And if we make the decision, then we can figure out if we're right or wrong and we can adjust. But if we don't make a decision, we're sunk.
Yeah, kind of. There's a lot to unpack in that. So I agree. I think let's start with alignment. And I think one of the things in any organization, and I talk about this a lot in masterminds that I teach, we talk about alignment. And alignment's built on trust, right? So you develop trust, and there's 4 components of trust and things that go into it. So what, if you can think, obviously when you stepped in, right, if the no P&L and there were significant opportunities for improvements, right, with trusted partners, right, which is what you want to have. That's a key word, trusted partner. How did you begin to create an environment where you drove that alignment? Because there is that place where you've got to make business decisions and move forward, and they're not going to be in the loop in those business decisions. So they're going to feel out of alignment. So what kind of things did you do in that process just to kind of start that? And then we'll get into the kind of the co-creating piece.
Really, when you think about, how we went about it, one, I looked a little bit in the rearview mirror, right? What have they done in the past? And also made sure I understood the culture and understood really kind of the shoes that they were currently walking in. We may need them to change shoes, right? But you need to understand kind of where they're at and kind of their position is. The other one is I'm a big believer and have always been a believer of understand all the steps. So I took a little time, we'll call it 90 days, and I literally did everybody's job. I I was in the field. I went and visited service providers. I went to our call centers. In fact, our call center just north of where I live, it got to be a little bit of a chuckle because the first time I went in, they were all nervous and Gary's here and et cetera. And I would go up on Saturdays and sit and take calls for half the day. And then eventually got to where, oh yeah, your chair's over there. And so, because they knew why I was there and that I was there to help them and do good for them and remove friction from them. So I'd say that the biggest thing really is getting everyone settled in on what is that due north and that shining star. And for us, it was singly, everything is about the customer, right? What are you doing to take care of the customer and make sure that customer is delighted and satisfied with what they're getting? Because we need them back next spring buying bedding plants. We want them to be delighted with their home, et cetera. So getting everybody zeroed in on that single goal and making sure that the reward infrastructure was aligned from that way. And then you've probably read it and you've probably talked about it in a podcast, getting everybody centered on a book. It's called Measure What Matters. So that way we spend some time really talking about our inputs and our outputs, and that look at, I don't need the latest spreadsheet that's created. We want one standard report that we all live off of. If it's not on that, then it doesn't exist, right? So that way we can just all be on the same page. And the other big piece is really giving everybody the chance to say their piece, to be able to talk and collaborate all the way through. But I also leaned in pretty hard on kind of a standard and regimented routines, for the organization to align on, look at, in fact, Dolan, one of the things I did, think about a blank, sheet of paper. We had HR hated this, right? Because this wasn't HR approved. But I had a standard sheet of paper that everybody worked off of. The first line was, what is your job? And to your point, what is your job? Forget about what's on your job description. What's your job? What are your top 3 priorities? How do you get it done? And what is your routine? Daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. Then what reports do you look at? Then lastly, what are your lifelines? So if any day, anyone sitting in a cube, anyone in a car, anyone in the field, they could pull up their sheet and know exactly what they needed to do if they were feeling a little lost. And it just drove that alignment, and it worked very effectively. Now, we had to evolve it. We had to tweak it, right? Nothing's ever perfect the first time you do it. But we really drove alignment from that perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, so I'll call you Gary because your screen will say dude. But I think that's one of the things that there's a law that I teach, and it is that clarity breeds confidence. And if you have clarity, and I love kind of the process that you took everybody through, which is, so what do you do? What's your job? And what's your top 3 priorities? And then what resources do you need? There's, as a leader, there's the 3 things we live with as leaders. We do, manage, and lead. Do means we're in the dirt, we're doing stuff. Manage means I'm providing resources and I've got your back. And leading means we're co-creating movement together. You're involved in the decision process. And how you balance those in your role when you're leading a team or managing a team, depends upon your role in the organization, really is going to determine your effectiveness and outcome without the routines and processes. So as you're going through that, and it's funny to hear the story about the OS moment where people see you come through the door in the call center, and it's like, why is Gary here? But then ultimately to build trust and purpose. As that kind of, I would have using that example, right, as kind of a linchpin to heading then Gary into kind of talking about people those are Lowe's branded people. They wear the badge. They've got the smock on. To talk about, how do you build that same trust with people that aren't in your custody? So the kind of steps that you took in the field with the vendors. And then I want to transition over to, kind of that lesson from, corporate to entrepreneurial, and then what applies from where you were to kind of where you are today.
Yeah. So in you think about you as a customer coming into the store, right, to get that home improvement done, whether it's new carpet or door, et cetera, and knowing that there's going to be an independent contractor tied to that scenario in order to get it done. Mm-hmm. For us, it was quite similar. It was about building trust with them, that we were a good partner, that we know that every time you walk into home, something may surprise you, right? Going to pull up something and see a little mold, or pull up something and you didn't measure right, didn't quote right, but we would always treat you fairly as an independent contractor, and be honest, not treat you like a vendor, right? We weren't there. And I got this kind of goofy saying that I lived with in that, and again, this is a retail environment, right? That the 2 most important people in the home improvement process, part-timer, 4:00 on Sunday, right? And that's the toughest person to train, right? And how do you get them to represent the brand correctly? And the other one is whoever knows the dog's name. And none of us knew the dog's name. No one at the store support or corporate office knew the dog's name. None of us at the call center knows the dog's name. The installer knows the dog's name. And so if you're treating the installer with respect, recognizing them, giving them some level of flexibility, you can deliver this product. Now, meanwhile, you can think about a Lowe's or even a Home Depot, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs a day be getting done. So no matter what, something's going to go wrong. We're going to break grandma's vase. We're going to scratch a wall. We're going to discover things, or there just wasn't the right expectations set with the customer. So again, if it's 1 or 2 or 3% of those projects, how quickly you respond to it, and you don't take the turtle approach, right? You figure out how to shoulders back, chest out. yeah, we made a mistake. We're going to take care of you, Mrs. Jones, right? We're going to take care of you across the board. And that was probably one of the hardest things to get installers, to get the service providers to live within. And we would, back to the whole part of measuring what matters, is also start giving them the right level of data, the right level of reports, and so they have all the information they need to run effective businesses. Because again, they have their own work. They Lowe's is giving them some of their work, but they have their own work. So we've got to make sure that they're absolutely getting the right level of information, getting communicated, and they know the rules or the playbook that they got to live within, and they really can know what boundaries they've got to be able to meet, with the understanding that the most important thing is that customer at the end, taking care of that customer. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a great deal of sense. One of the blessed in my career, similarly in my career, to to lead global services teams, and 80% of our business that we delivered to accounts like Disney and Time Warner and Fox and on and on and on to these clients that were delivered by partners. And so there is a body of trust, one that has to be built between the two organizations, right? So that they can do it, and they know you've got their back, and you're gonna help them and treat them properly. But it's interesting that I think a lot of times, and it applies universally in and out outside of any organization, but from that position of if they know truly that they're trusted and that you do have their back and you will resource them properly, it's amazing what people will rise to from the level that they rise to. And one of the challenges similarly we faced was the ability for organizations, Gary, to be willing to have the difficult conversation. If a customer was aggravated or a project was missed or a timeline was off, to step in and have that conversation quickly. And then the toughest of all those conversations would come to me. I would be the guy to go, I would tell my team, let me take the teeth marks. That's my job. I'll go take the teeth marks and you guys go focus on what you're doing. Fortunately, that didn't happen all that frequently. So, although I do have a couple of scars back here somewhere, I think.
Yeah, I kind of lived with this mantra, speed of the leader dictates speed of the team. So I was one of these bosses, right? That was, first one in, last one out, etc. But I also learned a little bit that sometimes that put undue pressure on the team, and that it was okay not to do that, right? So all in all, particularly as we all went through COVID, right? And we had the working from home and the balance and all those things, but still believe the mantra, speed of the leader dictates speed of the team, and being able to understand what are the key results you have to deliver. Because while I talk a lot about, customer service and delivering that customer value, at the end of the day, I had a responsibility to deliver the results, that the company expected. And if you don't deliver the results, don't look anywhere else but in the mirror. Because in the mirror, it's like you're the leader. Right. So what was it you could have done differently? And I'm telling you, without a doubt, there were times where I made big mistakes, didn't do the right thing, could have moved faster on an underperforming person, or maybe didn't shift things around correctly. But having that self-awareness and recognition is sometimes a little bit hard. And then having a team that will help tell you is also equally important.
Yeah. I think that's that body of trust, right, Gary? When you have a team who's willing to tell you how they think and suggest ideas. I would always tell my team, bring ideas to me. We're not going to have a difficult conversation until you tell me I'm short and overweight. Then I'm pissed off. That's different. So it's interesting to be able to build that trust. So let's kind of. So all of the there's a lot there that we could unpack, and we could turn this into a Dan Bongino style podcast and go about 4 hours today, but let's not. So your transition from Lowe's to now running your own business, right? Now you're working with multiple clients, and you're under a different obligation with those clients, right? So similar, but now you're that guy outside in the body looking in. So talk a little bit about kind of what what you're doing today. Let's frame it so those listening to the podcast understand what we're talking about, and what that means. Taking these experiences and then working with organizations to kind of help them adopt these lines of thinking so that they can reach velocity, they can accomplish growth, they can get to their outcomes and their worthy ideal, whatever that happens to be for them. So,
Yeah, so call it a year and a half ago, left Lowe's, and to be honest, was really blessed and I don't want to say lucky, right? Because that's probably not the right outcome, but really privileged from the standpoint of stood up and became a consultant. But my first customer was Lowe's, so I was able to help with the transition, keep informed with the gentleman who took my spot, who is awesome, and absolutely gave me that kind of ramp up space to learn kind of what a consultant does. So I was able to get in pretty good position regarding this business. But I even called you way back then and went, "What in the world does a consultant do, and what do I do now?" Right, kind of a thing.
yeah,
And so much of this business comes back to your reputation, what you're thought of, how effective you are. And good news is, I think within the industry that I've done well by myself as it relates to that. And so I had some organizations, one reach out to me saying, "Hey, could you work on our behalf?" Some of them I did, some of them I didn't. Right, overall. But the big thing really is back to kind of purpose and cause, right? If one, the organization that I was engaging with really had a purpose and cause and really knew kind of the path they were going, albeit we may needed to shape it just a little bit, of where they were going, that able to contribute. And the other one is I needed to make sure that one, I was confident that I could add value. Because again, I've worked with consultants in the past that I'm just like, God, they got their hand in my pocket and they're just taking out the credit card because they just want to create this fancy new PowerPoint, right? And so my big thing is just making sure that I could deliver value. And I'd say that for the folks that I've engaged with, it has been a bit of a journey, right? Learning on my behalf and on both your behalfs, but two, it's been very rewarding. To really continue honing my skills, continue learning, and continue kind of always learning, but then being able to make sure that I'm exceeding their expectations and helping them deliver value, whether it's shareholder value or for their private equity firm or their customers, depending on how we define it. But it's been just a ball kind of getting up to speed. And I'd say a year and a half into it, why didn't I do this sooner? I mean, honest to gosh, why didn't I do it sooner? Because it's been just that much fun.
Really. That's it. It's interesting, kind of that transition. There is, I think, when you first begin consulting, and there's a bunch of stages in it, right? Where you kind of you're wondering, okay, so to your point, Gary, when you were talking about, we spoke early on in your, as you were stepping out, and specifically around, so what do you do, and how much you charge, and how do I set a monetary number on a value, which in turns to ROI, and there's the old law about the value of your deliverable. The value of the money paid for a deliverable diminishes rapidly as soon as it's delivered. So clients kind of go, oh, okay, did I get my money's worth? And there's the reputation that precedes consultants. Right? We've all been in that scenario where consultants come and go, Gary, where they're, the bus pulls up and a bunch of interns get off, and you kind of go, so I wrote a large check. What are we going to do? What do I get that moves my needle, that gets me to my outcome, closer to my worthy ideal? So as I'm kind of curious about the lessons you learned in, there's the lessons inside of Lowe's, and then the lessons inside of consulting, and then what transcended, what kind of came along, because there was a lot of muscles built inside of Lowe's that you brought with you on systems and structure and process and thinking. And what came, and what did you kind of throw over the shoulder and say, nah, probably not what I need? And then what, maybe one or two things that developed out of that as you're providing guidance to the, the clients that you're your coaching and
Yeah,
consulting to
really
today?
great question.
Much
Yeah, great question. I'd say that it probably came out a little bit earlier in the conversation. I'm a huge believer in roles routines. Of defining kind of the roles routines that will get you to the desired outcome in the business, and so that way you're managing by exception. And really looking at those defects as they would be, and understanding what's outside of the acceptable range. So working within Lowe's, that was a big part about it. And as I've moved to working in a client base, and my customers are a couple of tech companies, a very large retailer, a regional manufacturer of home improvement products, and you think about kind of what they're doing, that rule really applies to them. How they go about it, and in many cases, I'm working with the CEO and often their leadership team, and finding that alignment is a critical part of their businesses, making sure that team is aligned, that entrepreneurial lead, CEO that started the company and founded it. They may be great at that, right? But again, it's their baby, they own it, and it's my way or the highway kind of thing. Getting them comfortable at the standpoint of sharing it outright and being able to collaborate and getting that broad feedback has been really important. And I'd say that one of the things that has been thrown over the shoulder or left behind is for anyone watching that's used to kind of corporate life, man, there are more meetings than you can shake a stick at, and more emails than you know what to do with. And so I'd say that part of what I have talked with all of my clients with is just do the simple rule of 3. If it's not driving sales, not making you more efficient, or not delivering more profitability in this overarching goal of taking care of your customers, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just stay away from it, right? And you don't need the CYA 5,000 emails and everybody copying everybody else, right? Just stop it. And do it quickly, right? Just stop the wasted, unproductive work, and figure out what that wasted work is, and just eliminate it. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know what it is. Sometimes it's a little forest and trees, but it is important.
Yeah. I think that's that's a really good lesson for organizations, and particularly in a smaller organization where you have a CEO who may have been a founder, and that founder, there is a ceiling, right, of things that we're good at. And when we hit that ceiling, we can either, if we have the desire to proceed, we can develop the skills. We can learn to do that. I think what happens a lot of times, and I see this with my clients, you're so close to it because you're the founder and you're emotionally engaged, and there's, fire in your belly on what you want this to be, that you can't see the challenges. You can't see the things that, allow you to extend trust to your team, so your trust feels comfortable, and that it becomes part of your process to engage them in helping you make a decision. You give them a seat we would give them a seat at the table, right? They get invited to the war room, and they can talk about whether we're going to go to war or not go to war. And I think they do lose clarity. There's a lot of shiny objects that happen in business, and it's easy to lose clarity on what you're going to go do because it looks cool. And
there's that challenge, right? Of look at I'm the CEO of this startup, right? I need to deliver results, versus also I need to be able to lift my head up and have a longer term view. And how do you divide the time up to do that? And how do you set aside enough time to make sure you got that little longer view? And the longer view may not be necessarily revenue based. It may be, how do I position my company as a subject matter expert, or a respected leader, or brand, et cetera. Right. And so, but meanwhile, short term, you have to hit your objectives, and you just cannot tolerate it. And I'd say that's one of the things that, coming out of corporate life that I bring with me. When you work for a multi-billion-dollar, home improvement chain or any retailer, you hit your numbers, right? You better deliver. And if you don't deliver, put that mirror on
Yeah.
yourself and go, what did I do? What could I have done better? And in some cases, you've got to have that resiliency or that flexibility to adapt.
Yeah, I think that's that resiliency and that willingness to look at yourself and seek feedback, right? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. I forget who said that, but some coach said that somewhere about feedback being the breakfast of champions. And I do agree. I think one of the challenges organizations, like one of the books that I use all the time, is called The Four Disciplines of Execution. It's a Covey book, and Covey's grandson and a couple of other guys put the book together, but it focuses in on that one wildly important thing. What one thing that is your goal will move the needle towards it? And what's your one area of focus? And it's very easy to, I'm guilty of this periodically, being deeply imperfect, much to your surprise. Being the older brother, but you get up in the morning and you create a list of 10 things. I'm going to do 10 things today. And you do 2, maybe 1, because you lose track of the one or 2 things. And then you get to the end of the day and go, what the hell did I do to move? Wait a minute. I was supposed to be doing this goal thing. And instead I was, outside counting the stones in my pavement. So, yeah, I think that focus and instilling those systems into organizations really is a powerful needle mover for them, and it's not easy to do.
No, not easy. And the thing is, if you don't have a roadmap of where you're trying to go, right? That's probably one of the biggest challenges you see with these guys. You can't build the systems to support it, whether it's tech systems or operational systems or processes, right? And so, because everybody's always like, we're going to roll out this new tech, right? And that's going to solve all our problems. But if you got a bad roadmap, you're going to have tech that's just going to get you to a bad destination faster, right? So you got to figure out how to have that path down. And again, you got to be able to shift just a little bit, right? Because not everything's going to be perfect, and you can't see around all corners. But it's that capability. And I'll tell you that the one thing that back to what we left behind, working at a big major corporation versus doing it independently. And this is going to make anyone watching want to leave and become a consultant. Now I get the chance to work with people that I really like and that I really trust and that I really align with. And I'll tell you the real benefit that is it speeds things up from a decision-making process. And it speeds things up because when you trust someone and you can absolutely put all the cards on the table versus worrying about the next political play in the corporate office, it's just such a big difference. And I'd say being able to do that, we've been able to have some super frank conversations, good and bad, right? And then be able to move things forward a little bit faster and a little bit more aggressively that will get businesses to their desired income or desired outcome faster.
Yeah, it's funny because I was on a call this morning with a gentleman in the UK, and we were talking about what do you do, and I described my job as I get up every morning and I go to fun because I get to work with great people. I get to talk to great people. My clients are great. There's a couple of clients that weren't so great, and I don't work with them. They have working with someone else. I took them to another portal and said, you probably need to talk to this guy. This person will help you. I'm not the guy. And it is a good thing. And for those of you in corporate life, if you decide to take the step out the door, I will remind you that it was Gary that said it was a good idea. And
Now, meanwhile, your significant other spouse may be going, "Are you crazy?" Because the whole notion of going from one standard paycheck that you get every week to multiple sources of income. But I'll tell you I'm so committed to it that, and again, as you know this, 2 of the clients that I work with, I took it a step further and I actually invested in them. So now I'm a part owner in them and took a much more, positive step to go in. And I think it's one of the ones you're going to get to these companies that you just love, right? And you love the people you work with and you want to be a bigger part of their business and hopefully of their future.
Yeah, it's very interesting how Gary, when you develop those relationships, right? And as you're pulling the covers back and you find out this is actually pretty cool. Not only do I want to stay longer, but I want to be I want to be a part of this. for not only for the, there's the law, the law of reciprocation, right? They win, I win. It becomes a very, very collaborative effort. So it's a good thing. Well, we are coming up to the end of the time for our conversation, at least in this podcast episode. Although you and I still have years in front of us to be brothers. But one thing that I think would be really interesting, just kind of as a final passing thought, for you to share, is you're as a coach consultant with the companies that you're working with. And this is just kind of popped into my head, it's probably new for them also to be working with you in this capacity. And there's light bulbs that turn on for them that didn't turn on before. So without names and company names and those kinds of things, but a couple of light bulbs that turned on for that person, a lesson that they went, oh, I never looked at it that way. I never thought of it that way. And that swung a hinge for them. Maybe one or two of those, because ultimately that's our intention, is to lead people into that point where they say, oh, you know what? That's a really neat idea. What if? And then the light bulb.
Yeah. I'd say that I've got example on both ends of the spectrum, right? So I had a company that I worked with that, to be quite honest, couldn't really get the CEO to let go, right? Everything was so tight and just unwilling to look at things from a different perspective, unwilling to really engage in a kind of open fashion, albeit we had known each other for a very, very long time. I made the decision I made the decision with them that, hey, look, I'm not the right fit for you, right? And moved on and wished him all the best, but we still keep in touch today, and hopefully I can help them in the future.
Sure.
But then for two of the companies that I work with, it's been literally the exact opposite. I've been getting pulled in more and more and more, and a little bit broader with the team, and almost very, very, and again, in many cases, these are, because they're small organizations, very family-like, right? From the perspective of kind of what they work with. And I'd say that the journey that the CEO and some of the leadership had to go through was understanding that it's okay to open up a little bit. It's okay to uncover the warts, right? Because no one wants to talk about their warts. And I always speak to it in terms of friction points. What are those? Where's it rubbing hard? That you're just not being able to move the business as fast as you want, and then understanding that some stripes we can change and manage, some stripes we just have to live with, and let's put them on the shelf, right? Those friction points, don't even waste another hour working on them, and go here. And so getting some of those leaders to kind of lean in on that thought process took a little time, but it's worked out, just phenomenally well, across the board, and hopefully you'll continue seeing their businesses accelerate, from the three priorities, right? Growth, efficiency, and profitability, with overarching, taking care of their customers and taking care of their people. Because you can't take care of your customers if you don't take care of your people.
Yeah, so true, right? That's the leadership. It goes back to kind of, we mentioned it kind of at the beginning when we were talking about leadership. Leadership is managing, it's a series of relationships, and it's all people. And as with all the relationships, we're all in a different place. Where we are today at 4:00 hour, the dynamic of where I am as an individual could be entirely different based on my circumstances and conditions around me. So it is being in tune with that, taking good care of your team. So good insights.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Thank you for doing this. I'm grateful. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. We may do this again in the not too far distant future. We may just get back together and do it again. But I'm going to close the podcast a little bit. So obviously people will want to talk with you. I hope people would like to speak with you and learn a little bit more, but just a couple things. What's your preferred way for people to reach out to you? And there's contacts and stuff I'll put in the show notes, but what's your preferred way for people to reach out to you if they want to know more?
And back to where I used to talk to my team about it. I don't care. If you're more comfortable with text, text. If you're more comfortable with email, email. If you want to hit a LinkedIn message, LinkedIn message. At the end of the day, right, we got lots of different ways to communicate. The big thing just is, whatever's most comfortable. But then, and if it's an email, no, it may take a little bit of time. If it's a text, I'll get back to you within the next couple hours. If it's LinkedIn, it might take a couple of days because I don't always look at my LinkedIn messages. But just know that there's that kind of urgency level to it. But anyway, anyone wants to chat, more than happy to do it, and more than happy to share any value that I can bring.
Cool. All right. Thank you for that. And I will include your cell phone number and Teddy's cell phone number and other. So I'll put the whole family in there so people will be able to get you. Well, a couple of things. First thing is love you, and thank you for sharing this today. If this is you're the first podcast guest I could say I love you. And
it's funny because to be honest, we probably don't say that enough. And again, you think about your own teams that you work with and just how much you appreciate them. You may not want to say I love you, but just make sure you're showing that appreciation for them.
Yeah, that's really important. That's very important. So look, for those watching the podcast, give the podcast subscribe. Depends upon the channel you're listening on, whether it's Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe, like, follow. That's important, not for a fan base and not for all of the vanity stuff, but it's important because it helps bring the podcast to the top of a stack of many podcasts to serve one intention. And the intention is, for all of the podcasts, is, look, if you heard something today that helped you, share it with another leader. There are leaders who aren't going to hear the podcast, who struggle with trust, who struggle with structure, who struggle with knowing the 3 areas to focus. So share this with them so they can learn from the podcast. They can become better leaders. That's what we're responsible for. We grow leaders and businesses. So please do that. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. I'm Dolan White. That's Gary White. And we'll see everybody in the next episode of the Next Interview podcast. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to The Next Interview. For more information about today's guest, be sure to visit the show notes. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow and be sure to join us here on The Next Interview.